Hello and welcome to Health Fitness Redefined. I'm your host, Anthony Amen. Join me today to take a dive into the world of health and fitness. We're learning overcome diversity, depict fact versus fiction, and see health and fitness in a whole new light. Today, guys, we're going to bring on an awesome guest for you. Like always, I like to think we always have awesome guests. But this episode, we're going to talk about that piece of equipment in the gym that you always look at and you go, what the heck is that? And why do I want to use it? I really like talking about kettlebells, different kind of kettlebell training. And I think we found a great guy to talk about that on for today. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Alex Salkin. Alex, it's a pleasure to have you today.
The pleasure is all mine, and especially because you have such a great name and a great town that your gym is located in. Mount Sinai. Your last name is Amen. This is a divinely inspired podcast. So I'm very, very pleased to be
I
here.
should just change it to that, Divine Fitness.
Why not, dude? You would crush it. You're probably crushing it as it is, but think about that. People are gonna be like, it's Mount Sinai. It's divine. I gotta be there. My results are gonna be out of this world.
Yeah, then I lost it when I went to Stony Brook. Then at that point, it's like, what does that have to do with anything?
You really will have to redefine the health and fitness at that point, I think.
But we're not here to talk about me. We're here to talk about you. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got into the fitness world and what got you specifically into kettlebells?
Well, I'll give you kind of the 30,000-foot view of my origin story, which is, I would say, interesting, but it's not as cool as like the Iron Man origin story or Spider-Man, or, like Spider-Man, he gets bit by a spider. Next thing you know, he's got these superpowers. For me, I was, you could say, a mild-mannered youth in that I was a bit shy, reserved, kind of like didn't have a ton of self-confidence. I wasn't like a complete shut-in, let's say, but like physical activity was something that I liked. I really was ambitious to try to get good at, but I could never really figure it out. And so, for instance, I was never really picked last for team sports in school growing up, but it was like almost last. It's like, they would get like the really athletic kids to be the captains of teams, and then they'd be like, okay, we need to start picking people. So they start with the best.
So you were the guy that was always picked before me. I would watch him go, couldn't even get second to last.
Exactly. I was like usually third to second to last. Even if one of my friends was picked, they'd be like, okay, I got to get good people on the team. I'll get Alex in the middle maybe so that he feels a little bit better. So that was kind of like my athletic upbringing. I did do gymnastics as a kid and I really liked it. I had a lot of fun. I think what I liked about it was that it was more like individualistic and there wasn't competition so much. It's like, here's how you do round offs. Here's how you do the pommel horse. And, I was between the ages of, let's say, maybe 4 and 8. And it was just a fun time. It was like a physical activity to have a good time with. It was not, nothing competitive. So I was really kind of scrawny, gangly, unathletic, weak, uncoordinated, still very handsome, but I was not blessed in the physical fitness department. And so much so that I remember there's one incident that really stands out from high school. We were doing weight training in the gym at the high school I went to, Millard North High School, which, by the way, was the home of Eric Crouch, who was a Heisman Trophy winner. And so everything was like, the whole gym was like decked out. We had his jersey was in like the main thoroughfare in the high school. I think his likeness was emblazoned upon the gym wall, if I recall correctly. So people were very, very proud of him. We had produced some very good athletes. And one of the kids who was on the football team at the time, I think this was my junior year, and he was like a sophomore, but he was like twice my size, just naturally huge, athletic, everything like that. We were bench pressing, and to him, the weight that I was about to bench press was evidently so minor that he didn't feel the need to spot me because he was my designated spotter. And so, I lowered the weight to my chest and I couldn't lift it up. And I looked over and he was talking to one of his friends by the dumbbell rack. So I kind of like slowly rolled the barbell down to my hips so that I could put it on the ground. And then our gym teacher, this guy named Mr. Chavez, who was massive. I mean, you want to talk barrel chested. This guy was like double barrel chested, and he shouted at him. He's like, Aaron. And like everybody stopped what they were doing and looked over at us. He's like, you're supposed to be spotting him. What are you doing? Only like 100 decibels louder than what I just said. And Aaron's face turned like beet red. And but I felt the most humiliated because everybody was looking at him, but then they had to see what weight it was he had to lift off the floor to put back on the bench. I don't know if he used both hands for it, if it was just one hand. But again, it was like the weight on there was probably the equivalent of a broomstick with a bagel on each end. It was really not a whole lot. So, it seemed like this kind of embarrassment sort of followed me. And it's not like there was nothing that I was good at, but it was always stuff that I kind of I didn't realize actually had any significance, like badminton, for instance. I could crush it at badminton. I could like do 2-on-1 and smoke people. If I had known it was an Olympic sport, I might have begged my parents to like get me badminton lessons so that you'd be talking to a gold medalist right now. But that ship has sailed. That was quite a few years ago. So that was essentially kind of like my upbringing, my origin story. And I was still interested. I believed, despite all of the evidence to the contrary, that there was something that I could do to prove that physical fitness was something that I was capable of engaging in and succeeding in. And after high school, I got into Muay Thai, thanks to a friend of mine who we got obsessed with this movie called Ong Bak, the Thai Warrior. It's a great movie. If you like martial arts movies with like no names but like incredible action, awesome movie. You have to check it out.
I'll have to add that to my notes.
It's a must. It's Ong Bak, ONG space BAK, I think, or BOK. That might be it. But in any case, we found out this martial art that the actor Tony Jaa was using was Muay Thai, and as it turned out, in Omaha, Nebraska, there is a school, Mick Doyle's Martial Arts Center, and Mick was a 2-time world kickboxing champion who specialized in Muay Thai. And we were spellbound because it was like 2006. Like UFC wasn't the way that it is now. Muay Thai was not as easy to find. Same thing with jiu-jitsu and all these other things. So we started training at his school, and and then I started getting into other things like lifting weights, and it was mostly the bodybuilding type of stuff. And I didn't really feel I connected with it, but I was able to be consistent with it. And then eventually a friend of mine introduced me to kettlebells. And I had previously he had talked about them like crazy. Previously I had no real interest in them. It seemed like a unique thing. I just didn't really see the benefits. So he called me over to his house to do a workout. And I was just immediately hooked. I was like, this is what strength training is supposed to be like, because it was like these full body movements. It wasn't just, stand in place and then you do a bicep curl, or sit in a machine and like as though you're some sort of like a heavy machinery operator and you're moving some stuff around. It was like you're in the real world moving some real weight around, and that was my first real experience with that. And so from there it was like I just got obsessed and never looked back, and my focus then became getting better and better at kettlebells, and then eventually adding other things like calisthenics and natural movement training and stuff like that. So the origin story for me was going from scrawny to brawny, and took a very long time to get to that latter category. But so far, it has worked out all right.
That's a great story, man. I feel like, and maybe it's just me, but everyone who's in the fitness world now was always like last picked, second to last picked. You never see the people that were the most athletic growing up getting into the fitness world. They're always doing something like desk job or something.
Totally. Yeah, I remember, and good to them, good for them. That's certainly nothing wrong with that. But I think that it seems more and more nowadays that because when we were growing up, fitness and strength training and sports and athleticism, these were things it's like you either get it or you don't, because there was there was a lot less information available. And if the information that was available didn't resonate with you, or didn't click, it's like, well, that was your chance and you blew it. So I guess better take up knitting or golf.
They lost me at we had to do swimming in high school. It's like, who wants to swim for first period, second period, and then be wet and smell like chlorine the rest of the day?
Yeah, and worse, who wants to wear a Speedo, with a bunch of other dudes in Speedos? It's like, even if you find swimming fun, like you're not going to live that down among your friends. They're going to be like, oh, dude, you're hanging out with a bunch of dudes with Speedos. It's like they'd find everything they possibly can to like just make it so that you've either got to make a sacrifice with, whether you're going into your second period class looking like a complete mess and being still soaking wet from swimming, or just no physical activity whatsoever. I'm fortunate I never had to swim in high school. I know people who did. And yeah, they didn't have a
It
fun
was
time.
always way too cold. It was middle of winter. You're like, why do I want to do this?
Yeah, it's like what better way to get people interested in sports than by making it as unfun as possible?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So what is a kettlebell? I mean, I know what it is, but I want you to explain what it is for those listening that may or may not know.
The perennial question. Well, a kettlebell is like a big iron ball with sort of a tea kettle handle, and it is a weight that has a really, really long pedigree. And most people associate it with being, we'll say, pioneered in Russia. But the fact is that even long before that, there are, we'll say, like elements of kettlebell training that go back to like ancient Greece, China, things like that. They didn't look quite like they do now, but it has a very, very long history, just a big sort of awkward weight with a handle on it. And, on the one hand, you've got, let's say, a dumbbell craze, which is, I think, something that sort of came around a little bit later. But the kettlebell as it is now, we could say, has its origins in, we'll take the sort of the main line thinking into like Russia in like the 1700s. The first time that the word kettlebell in Russian, which is girya, appears in a Russian dictionary is in 1704. So just to give you an
Wow.
idea of like how long ago, this weight sort of became, I don't want to say codified, but we'll say like in the form it more or less exists in now, just a big sort of awkward weight with a handle on the top of it. And basically what's really great about kettlebell training is that it's the essence of, in my opinion, it's the essence of real world strength training, meaning you've got an awkward, unwieldy weight that you have to move through free space. And I think barbell training and dumbbell training are awesome. I think that especially if you like them and you really identify with them, and they get you good results, you should certainly use them. But I think one of the things you could reasonably say is maybe a drawback to them is that they're very, very well calibrated. Everything is sort of, I don't want to make it seem like, I
They're
don't want to,
perfectly balanced. I think
yeah,
that's
it's
kind of what you're looking for. If you put your right in the middle in the fulcrum, it's easy to hold, stabilize, no matter what the weight is.
exactly. And that's no knock against it. That's one of the benefits of it because, with a dumbbell or a barbell or what have you, it's going to allow you to lift the most amount of weight because you can manipulate those variables. And to some degree, that's also true of a kettlebell. But with the kettlebell, because of its sort of awkward shape, thick handle, offset center of gravity, it makes stuff like presses and squats, as well as a variety of ballistic movements, very, very easy to do and very ergonomic. When I say easy, I don't mean all of a sudden you're going to be lifting 10 times as much weight as you would with a dumbbell or barbell, but it makes it pretty clear how your body is supposed to be moving while moving this weight. Whereas to some degree, I think with dumbbells and barbells, due to their design, you kind of have to move your body around the weight in order to make it work, as opposed to moving the weight around the natural movements of your body. And I think kettlebells kind of work a bit better for that. But some of the benefits of them include you can just use one weight and you can reasonably expect to get in a really, really productive and time efficient workout. Dan John, who's a very famous coach, and his strength coach, track and field coach. He was, I think he still holds the American record for the Masters weight pentathlon, has quipped that with one kettlebell in my bedroom, I can train for the nationals. So it's something that really has a lot of diverse qualities to it that allow you to train everything from explosive power to slow movements, again, like squats and rows and presses and things like that, as well as complexes, which I think are a bit easier to do with a kettlebell and safer to do with a kettlebell than maybe, a dumbbell, barbell, things like that. So in essence, what we might say is if you just look at what it looks like, it's just this big, ugly cannonball with a handle. But what it gives you is the ability to train explosive movements and through high rep lifts, like we'll say like high rep ballistic lifts, like swings and snatches and things like that, in a way that's safer than with dumbbells and barbells. It allows you to use a weight that has that sort of awkward and uncalibrated feel to it that a lot of real world tasks are going to have. And it's a lot of fun, to be very honest with you. I mean, I think that's why people get obsessed with kettlebell training, is because it's just a blast.
I love using kettlebells. I love the unbalanced feeling of it. And I like the fact that personally, my bodybuilding and lifting heavy weight days are kind of behind me at this point. So sticking more to like calisthenics and higher rep ranges, kettlebells are awesome for that. I mean,
Yeah.
doing a shoulder press with a kettlebell is 10 times better feeling than with the dumbbell.
Big time. And I think, part of that is that, again, it's like the shape of the dumbbell requires you to sort of move your body in a position to accommodate the weight, as opposed to allowing the weight to just be accommodated to whatever your structure is like.
Yeah, I really couldn't agree more. We're going to jump real quick and to talk about what we have to offer at F2 Consulting. Guys, if you're looking for fitness and financial freedom, Keith and I have partnered together to come with F Squared Consulting. So I'm going to sit with you, go over all your health goals, come up with what days of the week you want to work out, use the equipment you have around you, in front of you. On top of that, we're going to set nutrition goals. We're going to go through setting more active routines based upon what you need to do, whether it's walk more, sleep better, get more fiber in your diet, whatever that may be. On top of that, Keith is going to help you with financial goals. So if you're looking to get out of debt, you're looking to really figure out how much money do I need for retirement. All of that kind of stuff plays a burden, especially on entrepreneurs. All we think about is our business, and we never focus on ourselves. So we came together to say, hey, we're going to help entrepreneurs that are so overwhelmed with their business to really bring in their personal life. Because if you don't have your finances and you don't have your health, you're going to fail. I mean, if you burn yourself out and get sick, I've been there. It is not fun. So you need to take care of yourself, both financially and through your fitness and through your diet. So if you're interested, please reach out, fitbodiesfatwallets.com. Again, that is www.fitbodiesfatwallets.com. S-Squared Consulting. If you listen to this podcast, we're offering 10% off to everybody who listens. So go check us out, guys. Let's hop back into what we're talking about with kettlebells. And I'm going to ask you a fun question. What is your favorite movement?
Wow. It's a very good question. My favorite movement with a kettlebell, I would have to say, would be the kettlebell swing. And part of it is because it seems like it can be fit into almost anything else that I'm doing, and not only not interfere, meaning, detract, let's say, from my other fitness and health goals, but it actually just seems like it always enhances it. It's got a relatively low amount of fatigue that it foists upon you. Obviously, some fatigue, but it's just a blast. And you know what? I like lifting heavy. I like any other red-blooded American male. So it's easier, I think, to lift heavier with swings on a more regular basis than it is, let's say, with like presses, which I think also are a blast and a half. So yeah, I'm going to go with swings. But if I had to have a runner-up, I would go the completely opposite direction of like the foundation. And I would say the double kettlebell clean and jerk is amazing. It's
okay.
Yeah. Again, night and day difference in terms of like the complexity involved in these two things, but double kettlebell clean and jerk is my jam. I like it a lot.
All right, so let's kind of break that down and bring it back a couple steps. If I'm listening to the show and I'm like, wow, I now learned what a kettlebell is. I now learned what the foundations of it. Where do I start as a consumer? I'm looking at the kettlebells on the rack at my local gym, and I'm just, all right, now what? What do you think the first best/safest movement, I guess, would be for somebody who's never used them before?
This is a very good question, because one of the issues, I want to tell you a funny story. Many years ago, my coach and mentor and friend, Scott Stevens, he's the guy who taught me the kettlebell kung fu starting 15 years ago. He and I teamed up, and we were doing some workshops and seminars at local gyms for people who wanted to learn how to use kettlebells, because it was just kind of starting to catch on at around this time. And I got certified 13 years ago. So this was maybe about 12 years ago or so that this was going on. And we went to this one place that locally that did like body transformations and stuff like that. And they used kettlebells as a part of it. And the owners and the instructors are like, we want to learn how to do stuff like snatches and clean and jerks and stuff like that, which would be the equivalent of somebody going into your gym and saying like, hey, yeah, I've heard weight training is really good. Can you teach me like the Olympic lifts? It's like, dude, you're going to need to learn a lot of other stuff before you get started throwing a huge unwieldy weight overhead. So we had to try to, bring them back and be like, we would love to teach you those things. Let's work on this stuff now. So the first thing to keep in mind is that cool stuff you see, like throwing a kettlebell over your head and, flashing a smile at the camera, that will happen, but you need to have a good foundation first. And so without question, the first thing you need to know how to do is just pick it up off the floor safely. And if you know how to deadlift, which is a big, scary sounding term, but it's basically just picking something off the floor in a way that's safe for you biomechanically and that it also sits well with your particular structure. So you have to kind of figure out the best way for you to, follow the rules of lifting something off the floor safely. That would be the first place to start. Really doesn't take a ton of time. It does often take a good source of information. So whether that is with a trainer that you're working with one on one, or maybe somebody you're working with online as they view your technique, or maybe you're learning it from a book or whatever the case may be, you want to at least have a good source of information to get you the right idea of how to lift it. That would be number one, because it's obviously, if you're not lifting it off the floor, then nothing else is going to happen. The other thing is, I would say, this is very underrated movement, but I'm sure you'll back me up on this. Loaded carries are great because you can lift an appreciable amount of weight with them. You can lift one kettlebell, you can lift two kettlebells, you can put it in a variety of different positions. You can go for time, you can go for distance. The nice thing about it is that it allows you to kind of get used to the idea of training with a kettlebell while also learning what your body does when it's moving from top to bottom. Many people come in and they're used to stuff like bicep curls, tricep extensions. They're used to working like, one muscle group
Can
at
I
a
can I
time.
stop you there for a second?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I really like that, and I'm going to emphasize why. Like, I'm sitting here thinking about practicality, which is something you mentioned a lot during this episode.
Hmm.
Doing a bicep curl, how often do you really do that in real life? Like doing a tricep extension, how often do you really do that? How often do you bench press things in real life? But how often do you have to go somewhere, pick something up, and move at a distance? All the time. That's like what we do outside of the gym is doing yard work and picking something off the floor and I'm moving it somewhere else and then putting it down. Like that's way more of a practical solution to get right than a bench press or anything like that. So I
Yeah.
keep going, but I do love that a lot.
Yeah, and I'll add to that too. Think about all those things you're going to do in real life. It's yard work, or picking up a kid who skinned his knee on his bike or something like that. It's going to be an uncalibrated and awkward weight, and so knowing how to operate under those conditions is a huge, huge benefit for you, right? And I think that if you start with easy stuff like that, meaning when I say easy, I don't necessarily mean in terms of effort, but rather in terms of the learning curve that it takes to get to learn these things, it makes a tremendous difference in what you're able to accomplish later on down the line. Now, obviously, once you've got the proper technique for stuff like deadlift, i.e., just picking the weight up off the ground, learning how to do a kettlebell swing is very important. Kettlebell squats are also, again, something that can typically be learned relatively quickly, and you can modulate them for whatever your ability level is, whether it's your legs aren't yet very strong, so use a lighter weight, or you don't yet have the mobility, so you use just whatever range of motion you can manage. Similarly with upper body movements like overhead presses, rows, things like that. I think these are the most approachable and most important movements. These are the ones that are going to lay the foundation for other cool stuff like Turkish get-ups, clean and jerks, as we mentioned earlier, snatches, the cool stuff that people post on Instagram with, you know, heavy metal music in the background or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I'm not posting with my 1 pound kettlebells like some snatches. Here, watch me now. No.
Exactly. I do sometimes, but like it purely is satirically.
Yeah, I gotta say, one of my I don't even know if it's a real kettlebell workout, but doing push-ups off kettlebells or grabbing the handles
Yeah,
and you're trying to balance using the kettlebell base,
it's tough.
so much fun.
Yeah, and what's nice about that too is, sometimes when you're training somebody who's got the right amount of ambition, they're really focused, but maybe their wrists aren't ready to do push-ups on the ground. Doing them on a kettlebell handle not only allows them to avoid having to completely extend the wrist while they're still working on that mobility, but you can in many cases even fire up a lot of the other muscles in the arms and shoulders that you're not going to get, at least not immediately, by just doing push-ups as we would normally do them.
Yeah, definitely. And let's talk about a kettlebell swing real quick,
Totally.
just because I think that's your favorite movement and a lot of people's favorite movements. I know personally a lot of people do it wrong. So, what do you think is the one or two biggest mistakes people make when doing swings?
Well, the first one is that a lot of people are really not using their hips as much as they should. And when we say hips, most people think of like the hip joint. So I want to clarify, I mean specifically the glutes. So what we want is more of what is called a hinge, or you're kind of folding at the hips. I like to tell people it's like, imagine you're trying to do a long jump. And many cases, this gets people the swing right off the bat. I'm like, just imagine you're going to jump from here 10 feet that way. And they naturally just put their hips back, kind of like they're drawing back a bow. And then they're like, okay, that's exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. So that's the first one, because a lot of people, what they do is they see a movement and they approximate it with what they know. You can think about it like if you're learning a foreign language and you don't know the exact word for something, you'll kind of try to approximate it with the words that you do know. We do the same thing with the language of movement. And very often what you need to be told is something that you do know that you don't realize that you know, again, like a long jump, and you're able to connect something that you have experience with something that you're trying to learn. Very often that'll fix it, and it'll prevent you from doing like squatty swings where your hips are more going down as opposed to back, right? So that's number one. Number two is people are not really used to ballistic movements. And when I say ballistic, what we mean in particular is that there's an element of momentum to them. Most training that we do in a gym or at home, we're told, don't race through it, don't rush. You want to do it slowly and so on and so forth, which is very often very good advice. But you kind of have to flip the script a little bit with the ballistic lifts because they're supposed to be done fast. They're supposed to be done with a lot of momentum. So, you'll get people doing kind of squatting, and then you'll get people who are not moving fast enough. So in order to get the kettlebell to where they see it, it's like, okay, it's at about chest height. Naturally, they just think I need to lift it with my shoulders. And it's maybe not necessarily dangerous, but it's certainly not getting them what they think it's going to get them. And they're not really getting out of the exercise what they're supposed to be, which is explosive lower body power, the cardiovascular hit that comes with it as well. So I would say those are the two really big ones.
I think you nailed both of them. We have different minds when we explain how to do a kettlebell swing with the hip hinging. I go dirty instantly, and people go, "Oh, okay."
Oh yeah. I try to keep things PG-13, not because I don't find the other way effective or funny, but because sometimes, the blushing that occurs on their face, I
But
just
it got their blood pumping a little bit hearing it. So I'm like, all right, good, we're on the right track.
maybe in all the wrong places.
Yeah, it's fair enough. And then the shoulder thing is huge. I see so many people think it's a shoulder workout, and they're just trying to lift it as high as they can with their arms. And it's like, no, please stop. That's momentum doing that. That's not
Yeah.
supposed to be you lifting it up like a front raise, going all the way up.
Yeah.
So I do love that. So I kind of want to ask you just in general, because I know this is like a very specific topic.
Mm-hmm.
What are some key takeaways you would give specifically to kettlebells for maybe someone that's not a beginner, but now is more into working out? What are some do's and don'ts you can just help them out with?
Well, the first thing is that I would not fall into the trap of treating the kettlebell like it's only a good for hit workouts. Now, obviously, it has that ability, but I think a lot of people they'll either do one of two things. They start way too fast and they jump into stuff that they shouldn't be doing, and then they just always have crappy technique and they don't get to that intermediate stage. The other one would be that you want to keep the basics as a part of the menu by all means, but you don't want to limit yourself to the basics only. Like I have this saying that if you're a perpetual beginner, you'll never be a winner, because at the beginning you have to sort of restrict yourself to just the foundational stuff, including not necessarily doing a lot of variety, but just really focusing in on those bare bones basics. And then as you get better, you've got a much bigger uh, a much bigger canvas to work with. And so learning other movements, again, I this is my perspective personally. I know a lot of my colleagues would disagree, but I think that the core four kettlebell movements are swings, military presses, goblet squats, and rows. And a lot of my colleagues would say, no, it's swings and get ups. But the get up is like it's 14 steps. Like you wouldn't tell somebody, okay, we're gonna learn the swing, two movements, okay? Hips back, stand up. Now we're gonna learn an entire flow, and you have to balance this kettlebell over your head. And if you drop it, it's gonna cave your face in. It's like I would leave that for the intermediate stage personally. So I would say that would be a good time to start exploring new movements, but still treat them like skills. You don't want to necessarily fall into the trap of I got to give myself the hardest possible workout each and every time. If you focus on the intention behind the movement, so power generation for the ballistics and generating an adequate amount of tension with the slower movements, what we would call grinds, like squats and lunges and presses and so on and so forth, you will give yourself a really good foundation to start working toward advanced stuff like snatches, clean and jerks, bent presses, and other crazy things like that. But the first thing you got to keep in mind is you sort of have to shift your mindset so that you open up to other exercises, but you still want to maintain that mindset of practice over working out, meaning just trying to get a sweat. There's nothing wrong with that per se, but kettlebell training, and I would say maybe weight training in general, really is very skill based. And if your goal is just to burn calories, well, then just doing, let's say, just workouts or not having any specific plan or program or that sort of a thing, that's a very good approach. But if your goal is that you want to get beyond that intermediate stage and you want to get to, let's say, the more advanced exercises or some really heavy stuff, you still have to maintain the skill focus. And I think a lot of people lose sight of that.
I love it. And Alex, I want to just start wrapping this show up. So I'm going to ask you the final two questions I ask everybody. The first one is, if you were to summarize this episode in 1 or 2 sentences, what would be your take-home message?
Summarize this episode in 1 or 2 sentences? I would say the kettlebells are an excellent tool for those who know how to use it. So find somebody who can teach you how to use it, whether in person or online, but you want to find a good source of information.
Love it. And then the second one, the easy question: how can people find you, get a hold of you, learn more? Take it away.
Well, I would say probably the best way to kind of get the ultimate summary into my mad methods is to go to my website, 9minutechallenge.com. You could go to alexsalkin.com. It's the same thing, but nobody knows how to spell my name. Nobody knows how to pronounce it. Again, it's sort of this esoteric spelling. So I never send people there because they end up God knows where. But 9minutechallenge.com, which is named after my 9-minute kettlebell and bodyweight challenge, which is, as the name implies, it only takes 9 minutes to do. And it's designed to be done in conjunction with your regular training as opposed to separate from it. And it's based around the most undertrained, underutilized strength movement pattern, which is your gait pattern or your walking pattern. So the movements that you'll find in there are movements that you can learn in about 30 seconds. And we talked about people who want to get started with kettlebell training, what is it that they should do? One of the movements in there is loaded carries, as we discussed earlier. Another one is crawling. A lot of people really underestimate the power of crawling for their body and what it's able to do for their strength, their stamina, their resilience. I get people all the time telling me they feel better tied together. One guy from Canada told me that he was just like beating the crap out of his sparring partners in mixed martial arts, and they had no clue what are you doing? Like what changed? And he tried to explain to them. He's like, I've started crawling and I'm carrying weights. You should try it. And they're like, nah, forget about it. So don't underestimate it. It's very, very powerful. And even if you don't intend to wail on anybody, it's good to be able to, I would say. So, maybe all you want to do is lift heavier and feel really good. So 9minutechallenge.com, you can get your own free copy. And that's the number 9minutechallenge.com. And it's all yours.
I love it. Alex, thank you for joining us. Thank you guys for listening to this week's episode of Health Fitness Redefined. Don't forget, please hit that subscribe button and join us next week as we dive deeper into this ever-changing field. And remember, fitness is medicine. Until next time.